Hello, hi, and welcome to another episode of the Emma Gunn Show. And let me share some thoughts and feelings about a few things that have happened recently. The first has literally just happened. As I was setting up the camera, as I was plugging in my microphone, I received an email. And it was from somebody from a beauty company who wanted me to interview them on the podcast to talk about their founder story. And I'm in my year of just being honest, even though that doesn't always serve you well. But I just went back and said, look, I have to be honest. It's been my experience recently that the whole kind of entrepreneurial I didn't say formulaic, but this is what I thought in my head. I just said, I have to be honest. I think that listeners generally across podcasts are a little fatigued by the brand founder story. I had an idea, I had this struggle, I tried to make it happen, this happened, then this went wrong, and then I overcame, and now the brand is out there. I think that is a very well told story by a lot of people. And so I thought, well, I'll just go back and say, look, that's not to say that your story isn't worth telling and it isn't a good story. It's just that I'm not sure podcasting or a podcast is the right platform for it right now based on my experience. But I want to ask you what you think, because this has been my experience over the last couple of years. But obviously you and I have been doing this together now for 9 years nearly. And I think we're pretty much in sync. But there are obviously we have different experiences of the same thing. So you are listeners, I am creating the content that you listen to. And I will spot the trend. As you know, I think that everyone wants to tell their story. And I think it's just become a little bit samey. I think the space has become samey. But do you think the same is true? And I was thinking about this because I think one of the challenging things is that the thing that I now feel quite turned off by when it comes to podcasting and being a broadcaster myself is this sort of magical story of I was here, I wanted to get here, and this was my journey. And my goodness, look at all of the pitfalls we nearly had, whatever. And I just feel as though it's become quite formulaic and choreographed. And I feel quite, I can sit in front of somebody. I've been interviewing professionally for nearly 25 years, and I can smell a rat. I can smell when the story is fabricated, when it is embellished. And look, I love a good embellishment. I'm not saying that doesn't make a story sometimes better. But I think when it's every single episode or every single conversation that you hear, you just sort of think, oh, really? Because it's not always the sort of candy-coated story that people are telling. They might be making the worst bits sound worse in order to make their successes sound better. Anyway, I was thinking about all of this because there was a time when I loved creating episodes where I told the founder story. And indeed, that's where this podcast began. I spoke to brand founders who never used to get those column inches about their story. They used to get their column inches about their product or about an investment or about something sort of more product related, never about the human being behind the brand. And I loved platforming those people. I loved having those conversations. I found them truly, truly inspiring. But I was lucky in that I entered this space, particularly in beauty, at a time when beauty founders weren't used to being given a platform to talk about themselves. And so when they came on the show, they would sort of be slightly surprised, slightly sort of, this is exciting. And you'd get really honest, truthful conversations. And I just feel as though that's changed a little bit over the last couple of years. But they were unicorns, and I started interviewing people in that way because I would hear, maybe not from the beauty space, but maybe I would hear those sorts of interviews, and I would try to get those sorts of interviews out of people because I'd heard people like Tim Ferriss getting those sorts of interviews out of, say, tech entrepreneurs or someone from the health space or something like that. And so I was on the train earlier and I thought, this is so strange because really what this is I'm turned off by something. I'm now turned off by something I used to love. But the fact of the matter is that these stories used to be really compelling, and they used to be really amazing, and they used to be really engaging, and they used to be really inspiring because they were unicorns. And there's something so kind of dazzling about seeing a unicorn up close and sort of getting to see a unicorn. And so when you used to listen to these really wonderful stories as told on podcasts from entrepreneurs or from brand founders, it used to feel quite special. It used to feel quite magical. It used to feel, and it was really inspiring because particularly in the beauty space, there's no blueprint for success in the beauty industry. There really isn't, particularly with a lot of what's happened in the last 10 years, which has been innovation, innovation, innovation. I talked about one of my earliest interviews with James Reed, and there was no blueprint for how to make a tanning brand succeed, especially not a tanning brand that didn't give you a creosote tan. We're talking about the most subtle, beautiful, beautifying kind of tan. And it was a real hybrid between tan and skincare. And sort of some people were into it, some people weren't. And yet James has gone on to go and have this incredible brand and do wonderful things. But that can't be everybody's story. And it's just almost as though there were these few unicorns out there, and they were tame, and they'd come up and they'd chat to you. But now it feels as though everyone is trying to be a unicorn. And if everyone's trying to be a unicorn, then unicorns stop being special, right? And I don't know why I've leaned into saying unicorn a lot, but let's just roll with it because that's how it feels. So I politely got back to this woman and said, look, I'm really flattered that you want to be on the show, but I'm having this feedback that these brand founder interviews just aren't as inspiring as they used to be. I'm not sure how I said I didn't say it like that. And even when I'm looking at the computer now, if you're watching on YouTube, I'm trying to film this in natural light because I'm so over filming in the artificial light. It gives me a migraine. It's tedious. But again, it's like, I really want to tell you the story and share my themes of resilience, risk-taking and reinvention, navigating career change, starting a business and staying motivated through setbacks. I mean, actually, when you really break it down, that's a really normal story. I think everyone who goes through anything has its peaks and troughs, isn't it? But we've sort of, and I was guilty of this, sort of fetishized and glamorized these stories when they were told from the mouths of people who were slightly exceptional. But not everybody can be exceptional. Not everybody can be a unicorn. And that's when I think these things get devalued. And this is all me asking you, do you feel the same way? Do you think that there is an element of the sort of the formulaic brand founder story that's, hey, I wanted to do this, nobody would believe in me, so I tried this and I worked outside of the norm and I did that, and now, or it was I was burnt out and I decided to leave my hectic career in finance, and now I've started a beauty brand all hinged on holistic health. And I mean, my eyes roll so far into the back of my head, but again, because I'm fatigued by it, because this is what's in my inbox every single day, and every single day, with the greatest respect, I find myself sort of going, okay, and I'm not sure. And I've stopped. I do feel as though I owe people who've given me the time to send me an email just to sort of go back and explain why it's not going to be a yes. But I'm really curious to hear from you what you think. And that leads nicely into another email that I received about an hour before that one. I was on the train and had a lovely message from a listener in New York called Diane, who said that the way that she discovered me was via the 26 Habits series. Now, a lot of people discovered this podcast via 26 Habits, and at the time it was shared every Monday on The Pool, which was a website that no longer exists, but it was an editorial website. It was a really brilliant website with some brilliant writers contributing to it, and every Monday they would flag 26 Habits. So I think potentially that's how a lot of people found the podcast. That format, unfortunately, because I tried to bring it back, just doesn't seem to work anymore. I think podcasts, again, have changed so much. It's very much about personality-led podcasts as opposed to sort of content-led. So, for example, I listen to a lot of political podcasts, but the ones that I listen to are led by the people that I find engaging and can tolerate. Although there's one podcast I absolutely love, but when it's just one of the hosts, I cannot listen to it because left unchecked by his other two hosts, I think he's unbearable. But anyway, if you've listened, I'll see if you can guess who that is. But Diane asked me if I would seek out this particular guest. And so that's now on my list. I'm now finding this person, getting that book, basically thinking, actually, if this is a listener request and if this person has been with me since 26 Habits, then I would say that they're probably spot on, that this is the right sort of person for me to interview. So please, if you have people that you would like me to interview, please can you let me know, because this email genuinely I was on the train and I nearly stood up and grabbed the air because I was like, oh my God, this is brilliant. Somebody's let me know an interview that they actually want. This is absolutely fantastic. So I will be, Diane, if you're listening, I will be exploring all of those paths, and let's hope that this particular person, I won't tease it yet, but let's hope that they are interested in coming on the podcast, because I think it was really nice for me as the person behind this podcast, who's feeling very jaded by a lot of the emails that come into the inbox saying, I'd like to talk about resilience and how I built my business and how I overcame such and such. To me, that feels very tired. It feels very samey, and everybody has got that story, but everybody has sat down and figured out how to tell that story in a way that's engaging. It's not authentic anymore in terms of in my opinion, just saying. In the same way that I've been today, what was another one? Here's another one. Myth-busting book. Would love to come on the journey. They've overhauled their own health and would like to talk about stabilizing hormones. And it's like, I'm not sure. Anyway, there we go. Maybe I've marked that as unread again so I can go back and properly look at that. But it's very interesting when I hear from someone like Diane, who's taken the time to get in touch and say, I like your show. I've been listening for a while. I like your interviews, and I think this would be a really good person for you to interview, because if you've been listening to me for a long time, you'll get a sense of the kind of interviewer I am. And if someone says, I think this would be a really good conversation, I'm going to put 1,000 times more importance on that request than on somebody just blindly asking. Because I'm telling you, every single person who is emailing me asking to come on the show to tell their story is also probably emailing 20 to 50 other podcasts, because it's about reach. It's about getting your story out as much as possible, and I just don't really fancy being used for that. And it has, I'm sure you might have felt it as listeners. There have been people who've come on the podcast and I've thought, are you just stating the obvious to as many podcasts as you? Because nothing has really got me excited for a really long time. Everything feels really formulaic. But this particular guest that the listener Diane has asked me to get on, this one sounds really interesting, and that's got me all fired up in a really good way. So there's that, which I am excited to explore. Okay, this is a topic that I wanted to talk about for a couple of reasons, and well, first of all, I'm excited to talk about it because it isn't the sort of thing I've ever really brought to the podcast before, but equally, it's a horrible topic to talk about because of what actually happened. And it's almost, again, we're so desensitized to everything. But what actually happened in this case, this is a criminal case where a nurse was convicted and is now serving time in prison for the murder of babies and infants. And so that in its own thing is one of the most horrific and horrible things that you could say out loud. So, but not putting it to one side, just saying I want to acknowledge that it's not just about, oh, look at what's happened in the press about this case. I want to acknowledge that actually what fundamentally has happened is that there have been, unfortunately, these families have lost their children, which is heartbreaking. But I wanted to talk about it because it's a very interesting case, and it is the Lucy Letby case. So Lucy Letby is the nurse who was working at a hospital. What was it? The hospital, the Duchess of Sussex. No, let's not go there. But essentially, on her watch, in inverted commas, a lot of babies, infants died in circumstances that was it was too many casualties on that kind of ward, and there were rumblings of this person is not to be trusted, etc., etc. The reason I'm talking about it is because I listened to my friend Hannah and Saruti's podcast, Red Handed. I think they're brilliant. I think they're incredibly thorough. I think they are fair. I think they're really funny. And I do think their research is second to none. You might have heard me interview them on the podcast early days, because my brother and I started listening to them just after they started, really. And we just thought they were fantastic. And so I said, come on the podcast and talk about true crime. So They did an episode last year, and it was probably one of my best podcasts of the year last year in terms of the level of detail, how thorough it was, but it just left a mark on me because it left me in no uncertain terms that what had happened was that this nurse had done these things, and every single piece of evidence, every single thing stacked up to, gosh, this is horrible. This is premeditated, this is manipulative, this is vicious, this is vile, this was an angel of death in the place where they shouldn't have been. Anyway, they posted an episode last week saying we were wrong, and it is fascinating for a couple of reasons. First of all, fascinating that the same evidence can be weighted so heavily one way to you believing that a person is a certain type of person who has done terrible, terrible things, and how when viewed through a different lens, and we'll come on to what that lens is, you can see only innocence or at least not guilty. Now, again, I am not forensically looking into all of the information. I'm listening to this podcast, and I am really aware that Hannah and Suruthi were convinced. We talked about it on WhatsApp because when they did the episode, I said, oh my God, that episode was fantastic. We talked about it a little bit. And then I messaged Hannah on Friday night after I listened to, or Saturday after I listened to the We Were Wrong episode. And I said, I am absolutely gobsmacked. And essentially, the evidence that was used, or one of the key pieces of evidence that was used to send Lucy Letby down, if you like, has actually been refuted by a board of 12 experts from around the world in this particular area who've looked at it independently. They are not being paid because one of the doctors involved, his research was used, and he said, but it wasn't used in the right way. If it was, you would have seen this, and this. I won't go into the bits and bobs. I will put the links in the show notes because me trying to summarize it is just going to be confusing, and it's just easier for you to go and listen to those episodes. Also, listen to them side by side to listen to how the same thing, or the way that somebody talks, or how their bedroom looks, or can all be used to go, well, they were wrong, aren't they? But it was absolutely fascinating to see how, through that lens, guilty, awful, terrible, send her down, throw away the key. Through this, with these 12 independent experts looking at the information, they've said it just doesn't stack up. What's terrifying about this, and I know I've been speaking to other friends on WhatsApp who are saying, I have friends who are completely obsessed with this case, think that it's somebody being sent down, somebody being used as a scapegoat. When you hear all of the information, it's shocking. Never forgetting, mind you, that at the heart of all of this, there are families who lost their children, which is just unthinkable. So it's very, very interesting to me how 1 minute guilty with absolutely no room for there being any sort of idea of there being any wrong, just guilty, just so guilty. And then on the other hand, you look at the information through a different set of eyes. Again, these are expert eyes, and you go, oh, there's no way that all of that stacks up, and how easy it is for some information to then snowball to then, well, this, if this is true, then that thing must mean, even the way that she kept diary entries was then used against her. Like, look at how she wrote in her diary about things, then that must mean that she's guilty. It's shocking. And the thing that is shocking is, again, it could be that the truth is not one thing or the other, but that it lies somewhere in the middle. But what struck me at the end of that episode was that there might be people who know or knew that this woman was sent to prison for crimes that she did not commit. And I cannot imagine those people sleeping at night. How could you possibly think, yes, I know that this isn't 100% true. If this new evidence is actually stacks up, if that's the case, then it is horrifying to me that there are people who have been complicit and who have thought, yep, do you know what? It's right that she goes to prison and the other stuff doesn't come out into the light. It has been absolutely, I really recommend you listen to those 2 episodes of Red Handed, and I will put them in the show notes because Hannah and Suruthi really do their research. They really do. And what I love about them as well is that they've said, we're wrong. We got it wrong. So, and it's funny because Suruthi's very much like, has very much done a 180. Hannah has done, I would say, a 160. So she's almost there, but she's still got some questions, which is fair. There must be questions. If one side of it can be so damning, then it's not that the complete opposite is true. So I think it's a fascinating case. And I'm curious if any of you have listened to it, watched it, followed it, and what you think, because it does seem to be that kind of case that has just captured the imagination of a lot of people. Not the imagination, but it's just got people thinking, because it's so utterly horrendous, this idea that a massive injustice could be done. And also in this country, you can only launch an appeal if there's new information. And because the information that they've said wasn't used properly isn't new, it was old and it was used the last time but incorrectly, it cannot be leveraged to launch an appeal, which is just absolutely mind-blowing to me. Anyway, let me know if you followed this case and what you think. Maybe we can talk about it under this video. If you're watching on YouTube, you can DM me on Instagram where I'm at Emma Guns, or you can email me at office@emmaguns.com. And also I will post this podcast onto Substack so you can comment on that post. Okay, I have something exciting to talk to you about. This isn't a paid partnership or anything, but I'm too giddy to not mention this before I haven't even spoken to the brand about this really. And also I've only used it once. So bear all of that in mind. But I am holding in my hand, if you're watching on YouTube, the L'Oreal Elvive Growth Booster Shampoo, Anti-Fall Shampoo, and the L'Oreal Elvive Growth Booster Conditioner, Anti-Fall Conditioner, and the L'Oreal Elvive Growth Booster Anti-Fall Scalp Serum. Now, the reason I wanted to talk to you about these is because I think they are very special and potentially quite interesting. The reason being, if you've been here for a while, you'll know that I've talked about having androgenic alopecia. If you've been following me on Instagram for some time, you'll know that my hair has improved massively. I used to have very thin hair at the front. I have seen a trichologist at Philip Kingsley, and with the intervention of various treatments, my hair is much improved. But by sharing that journey with people, I am almost daily, or at least daily, I am contacted by somebody who would like me to offer insights on how to improve hair density, or how do I tackle hair loss, or my hairline is definitely thinning, what can I do? Now, the fact of the matter is trichology is not an inexpensive specialty, and therefore any kind of treatment comes at a cost. And let's just be very honest about this. We are living in a cost of living crisis, although people are talking about it as much as we should be. But I am so acutely aware every time somebody asks me and I say, have you thought about seeing a trichologist? And they say it's out of my price range. It's not available to me right now. I feel wretched because there are so few things I feel confident recommending. But the reason why I'm jumping the gun a little bit, because I would never normally talk about something before really doing my research. I'm actually, as soon as I finish this episode, I'm going to ask for the full press releases and trials. But the reason why I'm excited to share this is because this is accessible. L'Oreal Elvive, it's accessible, price accessible, and also just easy to get hold of. And it contains an active ingredient called aminexil. And that is an ingredient that has also appeared in other L'Oreal owned brands like Kerastase and L'Oreal Pro. And from what I understand, the clinical trials, the results of the trials in those products, where the concentration I think is a little bit higher, the results have been really wonderful, almost comparable with a topical treatment like minoxidil, which is what I have been on. Now, that's not to say it's a guarantee that it will work on you. As I say many, many times to people, if you are experiencing hair loss or hair thinning, it is vital that you investigate and interrogate the underlying causes. I had blood tests to find out what my underlying causes were to then have the right treatment. So you can't just sort of throw something at it and hope that it works. But if that's your only option, then I think this could be an absolute game changer. So I just wanted to flag that up. I'm going to put the links in the show notes, and I'm going to keep using it in conjunction with my other treatment, just so I'm not stopping any treatment. I get a lot of messages from hair loss brands saying, could you use our treatment? You can't use it with minoxidil, so you'd have to stop what you're doing. And I just sort of think, oh, why would I do that when I've had really great results? What if my condition relapses? I don't. It's a bit risky. Anyway, I think that's a really wonderful potentially brilliant product because it's on the high street, it's accessible. I know I've talked about the Nioxin anti-hair fall shampoo. I think that's really good too. But I think L'Oreal bringing it, which will be slightly more affordable, more price accessible, I think that's a real game changer. So trust me, I used it this morning, and actually the glow booster, if you're watching on YouTube, see the little ridges on the side? That's how much you use every time. And I must admit, it has given a sort of real fullness to my hair there. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see me sort of pushing my hairline. It's even when my hair was wet after I'd applied it, it felt bulkier, which I wasn't mad at. So I will continue to use it. I will talk about it a bit more. I'll probably write a Substack review of it and where I share a little bit more information. But if hair thinning is a worry, then please, please, please check this out, because again, accessible, you can get it really easily. Okay, if you're watching on YouTube, you might have spotted that the light is failing because I'm trying to film in daylight. So let's do this last bit really, really quickly. And the last bit is actually a listener question. It came from YouTube, actually, with a listener saying, you said a little while ago that you had stopped weighing yourself. Could you explain how you're getting on with that, or just share a little bit more information on that? So to catch you up, I have lost 40 pounds. I have maintained my weight loss for a while, and I am in recovery from something resembling binge eating disorder. I have body image issues. I have food image issues. I think I see images of food. I see food people. I have a very unhealthy relationship with food, my body, etc., which I have to work on all of the time, but I am in a much better place than I have ever been. But towards the end of last year, I talked to my coaches, Emma Story-Gordon and Chloe Madeley from the EC method, and I expressed my dissatisfaction with maintaining my weight and how I'd weigh myself every day and there'd be fluctuations and it was really annoying. And I was still working out and I was still watching what I was eating, not in a restrictive way, but just I was very mindful. And they made an observation, and Chloe was the one who actually made the observation, that if you have been big for a long time, if you have been heavier for a long time, and during a lot of that time you've been trying not to be heavier, when you do eventually lose the weight, there is not a day that goes by when you don't worry about regaining. And I'd never thought about it like that. I suppose I had thought about it. It was sort of obvious. But hearing somebody else say those words was really interesting. So I thought, oh God, that's absolutely true. And so Emma actually said, you just need to stop weighing yourself, because you are weighing yourself whilst working out, whilst being mindful of what you're eating, not restricting, but being mindful of what you're eating. And you're not going to elicit a result, because that way of eating and that way of exercising has lost you the weight it's going to lose you. So the only way you're going to lose more weight is if you exercise more and eat less, because you're in a smaller body now and you don't want to do that. So if you get on the scales every day, you are going to be disappointed, because in your brain, you're doing the same actions as you were doing to lose weight, and now nothing's happening. Of course you'd feel down, which made perfect sense. So she said, stop weighing yourself. So I think it was in October, maybe September. So I'm going to hiccup. I stopped weighing myself. I weighed myself once in November, and my weight was the same. I think it was maybe not even half a pound heavier, but it was like, it didn't bother me. And then I didn't weigh myself over Christmas, which was huge. And then I didn't weigh myself in January, which was quite a big deal. But I started to have quite negative thoughts about, oh, well, I would have gained weight. And I started every morning, I think it's probably between 7 and 10 pounds. And I'd put on clothes and I'd think, oh yeah, this still feels roughly the same, but I've probably got a bit more wiggle room than I realised. Anyway, I finally, last week, decided to weigh myself. And I was exactly the same weight to the ounce that I was when I had last weighed myself in November. So all that's to say that when I got this question from a listener, I thought it's really important that I share this, because I think, again, this is all part of the recovery, in that just because I'm not, in the past when I haven't weighed myself, I've gained weight. But in the past, when that was happening, I wasn't armed with all of the work that I've done, all of the changes that I've made in order to eat in a way that is more responsible, in inverted commas, and to exercise in a way that makes me feel really excellent, but also supports my body to look a certain way, and also help me get into a calorie deficit when I have needed it. And so it has been actually really it's been a really wonderful feeling to think I can take my eye off the scales and not worry in the same way that I used to, because the work that I've done, this has confirmed that all of that work that I've done has been work worth doing and has done the job that it was supposed to do, because I haven't gone back to bad behaviors. I live my life. I enjoy my food. I have a drink every now and again. I eat out in restaurants, but I always come back to a certain way of eating that I feel fuels me, makes me feel fantastic, makes me feel full. And I'm confident it is supporting all of the training that I do, for example. So to the listener or the viewer who asked about that, it's been a really wonderful experience. And the November to February, not weighing myself felt really nerve-wracking, but I'm delighted to say that I thought I was genuinely convinced, okay, it's going to be 7 to 10 pounds. Okay. And I was starting to strategize how I'd lose that again. And I got on the scales and it was exactly the same. And I thought, oh yeah, because I've been doing all the stuff. I did all the work. I did all the coaching. I put in the time. I learned. I listened to my body, all of those things. So that is how it's going for anyone who's asking. The light is gone, so I think I should draw this to an end. It won't matter if you're listening on the podcast app. And if you are listening on the podcast app, please do leave a 5-star review. That makes all the difference and keeps a podcast like mine noticed and up there in the in people's eye lines. It would be really kind of you if you wouldn't mind leaving a 5-star review. And if you aren't following me on Substack, please do click the link in the show notes and go and subscribe. It's free to subscribe. You get a weekly beauty column for free and then some other things for free. And then occasionally, if I've spent quite a lot of time putting together a feature, then I will put it behind a paywall. But it's not super spenny. Although I am thinking about the costs of Substack, because if you pay £5 for every person a month for every person that you want to follow, then you're going to be spending an absolute fortune. Anyway, that's another subject. Maybe you can weigh in on that. Just get in touch with me. office@emmaguns.com. DM me on Instagram where I'm @emmaguns. Substack. Comment below if you're watching on YouTube. And you can also comment on Spotify, don't forget. Anyway, thank you so much for spending this time with me. It's been lovely. And do get in touch and let me know what you think about podcast guest Lucy Letby, hair loss, and also scales. What do you think? Get in touch. Anyway, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I shall see you on the next one.